March 7, 2018. 50-year-old housewife Masako Akagi is on her way home from the supermarket late at night. She thinks of her husband, Toshio Akagi, who has for quite some time felt down, not like himself. She would later recollect that the once outgoing and bright Toshio has stopped smiling and fallen into a perpetual state of anxiety and sorrow. When Masako arrived at her house and opened the door, she found her husband's dead body. The note at his feet read, "To Masako, thank you for everything. I'm sorry. I feel scared. I feel depressed both in mind and body." Toshio, a civil servant in the Kinki Local Finance Bureau, was implicated in the biggest political scandal in Japan since the 1970s. Driven into a corner by his superiors, the media, and the public, Toshio felt no other option was presented to him than to end it all together. In her desperation at losing the love of her life, Masako felt compelled to act and would soon engage in a legal battle with the most powerful people of Japan's political elite. It all began more than 1 year ago, in early February of 2017, when opposition members of the local Osaka Diet began to investigate a suspicious sale of state-owned land to a private educational institute. The story quickly gained national attention when the liberal newspaper Asahi Shimbun published an article on February 9, 2017, detailing the transaction. According to the story, in 2016, state-owned land which was appraised for 953 million yen, approximately $9.2 million, was sold to the private educational institution Moritomo Gakuen for 134 million yen, resulting in a discount of 819 million yen. The article argued that the discount was granted because of Moritomo chairman Yasunori Kagoike's close relationship to then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's wife, Akie Abe, who visited Moritomo Gakuen's preschool and was named honorary principal of the soon-to-be-constructed primary school, Mizuho no Kuni, or Land of Abandoned Rice, on the state-owned land in question. State-owned land essentially means that the land is an asset of the people themselves, and profit from any sale would be added to the government's budget, in return, at least in theory, decreasing the burden on taxpayers. The Japanese public, which is notoriously adamant about its hard-earned tax yen to be managed in the most effective manner, was furious over this alleged case of corruption. The government losing out on over 800 million yen just because a friend of the Prime Minister's wife doesn't want to pay full price is preposterous. By this point, however, it could not be proven if the discount was directly ordered by Shinzo Abe or any other government official. The ministry that authorized the sale was the Kinki Local Finance Bureau, a branch of the Finance Ministry, which oversees most transactions of state-owned land in Osaka and adjacent prefectures, the workplace of the late Toshio Akagi. When asked for comments by newspapers, ministry officials said that the large discount was given because industrial waste was found below the surface of the construction site. The discount was subsequently given to compensate for the waste removal costs any potential buyer would have to shoulder. In response, a great deal of reporters, lawyers, and members of parliament filed information disclosure requests to retrace the exact calculation process of the discount and search for any clues of involvement of Akie or Shinzo Abe. Initially, their requests would simply be ignored by the Kinki Bureau and later refused outright, with the explanation that any document detailing the pre-sale process have been destroyed in accordance with government regulations. The only archived document was the transaction document, which didn't include any implicating information. In the parliament, opposition lawmakers immediately began to question Finance Minister Taro Aso, who reiterated the remarks of the local bureau. When Shinzo Abe himself was questioned during the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives, he boldly stated that neither he nor his wife had anything to do with the discount, and that if anything of that nature should come to light, he would resign from the Prime Minister's office as well as the Diet. On March 23, 2017, during a special session in the budget committees of both houses of parliament, Yasunori Kagoike, the chairman of Moritomo Gakuen, was called as a witness. His testimony turned into a media spectacle, with most major networks providing live coverage of the parliament session. Japan's public broadcaster NHK reported 16% viewership. It has become clear by this point that the Moritomo Gakuen scandal had the potential to bring about the fall of Shinzo Abe, who was on his way to become Japan's longest-serving prime minister. Moritomo Gakuen is by no means a normal school, and Yasunori Kagoike is by no means a normal chairman. Unlike the vast majority of private schools in Japan, Moritomo follows an ideologically motivated curriculum. Students are required to recite the Imperial Rescript on Education, a nationalistic document from the Meiji era. The school and chairman have been called ultra-nationalist in foreign and domestic news media, and parallels were drawn between pre-war nationalistic education and Moritomo's curriculum. As the chairman, Kagoike himself is the architect of the curriculum in question and can be considered a bona fide Japanese ultranationalist. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is considered to be on the right wing of his party, the Big Tent conservative LDP, with his wife Akie, known for her engagement with ultranationalist and revisionist organizations, one of which being Moritomo Gakuen. Kagoike's testimony in the plenary session would be decisive in finding out if political influence has played a part in the land sale. Kagoike, when asked what he thought about the heavy discount, testified, "When the price dropped to 134 million yen, I was very surprised at the time." Opposition lawmakers also asked him about his relationship with Akie Abe, to which Kagoike testified that she gave him a donation of 1 million yen, approximately $7,000, in the name of her husband. Akie Abe denied this allegation, saying that she doesn't remember pledging a donation. Kagoike, however, said he clearly remembers, quote, "because it was such an honor for the school," unquote. In his testimony, Kagoike referenced his previously good relationship with his ideological comrade Akie Abe and lamented, "All the people who previously supported me have now turned on me, and I'm wondering, how could we let it get this far?" Even though Kagoike and Abe should be political allies, Kagoike came into the crossfire of a national political scandal, and Shinzo Abe was obviously more than willing to throw Kagoike under the bus if it meant saving his political career. Accordingly, Abe's allies in parliament tried everything to brand Kagoike as an unreliable witness, citing for example his ongoing criminal court case regarding subsidy fraud, or the fact that he allegedly used Shinzo Abe's name for fundraising purposes without obtaining permission. This conflict of interest led to the ultranationalist Kagoike to become an unlikely ally of the more left-wing opposition, which was keenly interested in implicating Shinzo Abe and his party in a corruption scandal. Kagoike played along with the opposition, and when asked whether he believed there was political influence exerted upon the discount process, he answered yes. Another damning testimony was a fax he was able to produce, which included a request made by him to Akie Abe's office whether she could ask the finance ministry about a lease extension. While the office responded that they were unable to comply at the moment, the existence of the fax with a request even being acknowledged certainly raised eyebrows. Kagoike further testified that Akie Abe contacted him when the scandal broke and asked him to refrain from talking about the fax and the donation if he was called to testify at the parliament. Kagoike's testimony in part led to Abe's approval rating dropping 15% for the next 6 months. Damning as the testimony was, it was not enough for his political enemies to force him out of office, as concrete evidence of political influence exerted by Abe, his wife, or another individual connected to him ultimately could not be produced. Kagoike alleged during press conferences that sontoku, a Japanese word referring to people acting the way they believe other people would want them to act, without any direct influence exerted, worked in his favor at obtaining the discount. The story goes like this. Officials in the Kinki Local Finance Bureau applied the exorbitant discount because they believed that Shinzo Abe, legally speaking their highest-ranking superior, would wish for it. Shinzo Abe himself favored this explanation as well, simply because it freed him from any legal implications. After all, if people act on your behalf, in the process even committing illegal acts, you cannot be held accountable if you really haven't exerted any pressure or influence upon them. The Sontaku interpretation kept Abe just afloat, and when in late 2017, as Moritomo started to become old news, North Korea intensified its missile tests, and Shinzo Abe took the chance and called for a snap election by dissolving the parliament. By this point, his approval ratings had recovered somewhat, as he was always perceived to be a strong leader capable of defending Japan against North Korea, and there simply wasn't any other candidate who was deemed fit for the job by the voters. Abe's LDP managed to lose only 7 seats in the election, mainly because of the opposition being in disarray, with parties being dissolved and recreated in the weeks before the election. Shinzo Abe managed to come out of the Moritomo Gakuen scandal without taking too much damage, and as long as no evidence would be produced, he was safe. This, however, would soon change, as in February of 2018, 1 year after the story broke, rumors began to float that the documents the finance ministry produced at the onset of the scandal were falsified. With this allegation, the Moritomo Gakuen scandal returned to the national spotlight, now stronger than ever, and Shinzo Abe was the main suspect, now not only of corruption, but also of falsifying official documents. 1 year earlier, in February 2017, Toshio Akagi, a civil servant in the Kinki local finance bureau, was at his home enjoying a late dinner with his wife. Toshio took pride in his job, working for his country and the public. He was an idealist who followed the laws that regulated his profession meticulously. Suddenly, the landline at his home rang. It was his boss, who summoned him to the office. Whilst somewhat unusual, this hasn't been the first time Toshio was needed at the office at such a late hour. He changed into his suit and headed towards the bureau, and when he arrived, his boss took him to the archive room in the basement. To Toshio's surprise, people have been waiting for him in the dark basement room, and when he entered, none other than the highest civil servant in charge of all land sales conducted by the finance ministry, Nobuhisa Sagawa, greeted him. What happened next would ultimately plunge Toshio Akagi into a state of internal conflict, as Sagawa did the unthinkable and ordered him to take archived sales records and delete any information concerning high-ranking individuals like Shinzo Abe, Akie Abe, and Taro Aso. Toshio was dumbfounded by his superior's orders. He had obviously heard about the scandal in national news surrounding a land sale his department conducted, but being ordered by his boss's boss to commit a felony by altering records was not anticipated by him. Toshio, being an idealist, refused the order, stating that the laws preventing a falsification of official documents were to be observed at all costs, even at the loss of the Prime Minister. Official documents are, after all, the property of the public. Sagawa, however, pressured Toshio by arguing that he worked for the finance ministry, which is led by Finance Minister Taro Aso, who is in return under the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. His loyalty to the leader of the executive branch was supposedly more important. Ultimately, Toshio couldn't defend himself against the individuals who were in a much higher position than himself, and relented. He altered the documents the same night, deleting all references to Shinzo Abe, Akie Abe, and Taro Aso. He has done it. Not only did he betray his ideals and responsibility towards the Japanese public, but he also made himself part of a criminal conspiracy. In the following months, he followed the media circus around the scandal extensively. He saw Sagawa, the man who ordered him to falsify the documents, testify in parliament on the details of the sale, presenting the very documents Toshio falsified to a national audience. Toshio was petrified. He spent the next year in a mixed state of perpetual fear, guilt, and disappointment in himself. He began to be consumed by the fear that when the falsification was to be exposed, he would surely be implicated as the very person who falsified the documents. He was fearful of losing his life's profession, being branded a criminal, unable to provide for his family. After 1 year of depression, on a morning in February of 2018, he read the newest piece of the Asahi Shimbun on the Moritomo scandal, and his heart stopped for a second when he read that reporters believe documents were falsified. His greatest fear has become reality, and Toshio was unable to face the situation he found himself in. 5 days after the exposure of the falsification, Toshio Akagi ended it all. Shortly before, he supposedly went to the police and left a testimony. A few days later, Nobuhisa Sagawa resigned as department head, and Finance Minister Taro Aso faced the press and admitted that official documents were falsified, with passages containing the names of Shinzo Abe, Akie Abe, and himself to have been deleted. When asked by reporters who had ordered the falsification, the minister refrained to comment. When asked whether he would resign as finance minister, he strongly denied the idea and said responsibility lied with Sagawa. By this point, the press, the opposition, and the public were furious. Document falsification is a criminal act, is already preposterous, but deleting the names of suspects in a corruption case shows beyond any doubt that political influence had to be exerted. Opposition lawmakers took the chance and called Sagawa to the plenary session again. On March 27, 2018, he was put under oath and presented to the public as the civil servant who broke the ideals of his profession, whose power harassment caused his subordinate to end his life, and who resigned in shame, being threatened with criminal persecution. Unfortunately for the Japanese public, during the 5 hours Sagawa was questioned in the parliament, he mostly refrained from making any testimony surrounding the details of the falsification, including any statement on who ordered him. He invoked his right to not make a statement that could incriminate him. For my American viewers, he pleaded the fifth. This was of course detrimental to the opposition, who ideally wanted to illustrate a chain of command from Sagawa all the way up to the Prime Minister. To that end, Sagawa was surprisingly clear when it came to just one question. Did you ever receive an order or were pressured by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Akiya Abe, or Taro Aso to alter the documents? Every time he was asked, Sagawa clearly stated that there were no orders and no political pressure exerted on him by any government official. Opposition lawmakers showed more aggression than usual in their questioning and drove Sagawa more and more into a corner. How could it be that Sagawa either did not make a statement or evaded the question when it came to who ordered him, but was clear and unequivocal in stating that no government official influenced him? It didn't make any sense, and even though the pressure exerted upon Sagawa to tell the details by the public and lawmakers was incredibly high, he did not budge. In the end, the 5 hours of questioning on national television could not produce any evidence that Shinzo Abe or someone connected to him ordered the falsification. The Japanese public was left with a scandal and the question who was responsible, with no clear answer in sight. Abe's approval rating plummeted from 44% to 38%. This, however, would prove again not to be enough for Abe to resign. Even though he pledged in 2017 that he would resign if his wife or himself were implicated in the scandal, he was able to somehow navigate the criticism, again by perpetuating the Sontaku explanation, this time extending it to the document alteration. During this time, Shinzo Abe was seen by the public as a prime minister who has done a relatively decent job with the economy, so he had a somewhat stable baseline popularity. Much more important was the fact that for many voters, no other viable candidate for the Prime Minister's office was available. Also, much of the anger expressed by the public was directed at Sagawa, who was seen as a high-ranking government official whose power harassment ultimately caused the death of one of his juniors. Power harassment at the workplace is certainly something many Japanese people have experienced, and the media did their part in vilifying Sagawa by repeatedly showing footage of his opulent house, displaying how much salary the taxpayer has paid to what turns out to be a criminal. This combination of factors lowering the impact of the scandal on Shinzo Abe soon turned out to be his saving grace, as no evidence could be produced in 2018 and 2019. The scandal continued to simmer, but soon the media and the opposition turned their attention to different matters. For one person, the matter couldn't be left as it was. Masako Akagi, wife of the deceased Toshio Akagi, opened a lawsuit against the central government and Nobuhisa Sagawa in March of 2020. She alleged that Toshio developed a depression because Tokyo officials, and especially his superior Sagawa, forced him to alter documents which ultimately led to his death. Masako sued for wrongful death and aimed to get 107 million yen, approximately $1 million from the government, and 5.5 million yen from Sagawa. The money, however, was secondary, as her main goal was to thoroughly explain the circumstances that led to her husband's death. Masako also stated that she wants the government to open a third-party investigation into the falsification to ensure that no civil servant will ever be put into the same situation as her late husband. The media provided extensive coverage, and Masako's emotional retellings of her husband's last months were undoubtedly touching the heartstrings of many Japanese people. The central government immediately requested the case to be thrown out, and Sagawa's lawyer stated that no civil servant can be implicated for illegal actions in civil trials by individuals. The court decided to let the case continue, but in April 2020, COVID-19 drove out the attention of the public and the media on the case. For Shinzo Abe, any political implications from the scandal became obsolete, as his approval ratings plummeted because of his mismanagement of the pandemic. In August 2020, he resigned his role as Prime Minister, but retained his position in the lower house. In early 2021, when the case began to enter the main phase, media attention returned when it was alleged by the plaintiff that Toshio Akagi composed a file with detailed records of the document falsification. In her quest to illuminate her husband's workplace conditions, Masako demanded Shinzo Abe and Taro Aso to reveal the truth and publish the tell-all document. The government initially neither confirmed nor denied the existence of the so-called Akagi file. Masako's lawyers requested the court to order the government to publish the file, but the court only asked the government to turn over the file, to no avail. In Japan, courts do not like to pressure the government into doing anything, so at the time, it would be no surprise if the file were never released. In May 2021, the government, under much pressure from the media, confirmed the existence of the Akagi file, but refrained from releasing it until June 22nd, when they voluntarily released a 500-page document considered to be the Akagi file. Even though names and personal details of several officials were blacked out, allegedly out of concern for information security and personal information protection, the Akagi file clearly shows how Finance Ministry officials in Tokyo ordered the Kinki Local Finance Bureau to alter the files in accordance with what was stated by cabinet officials in the Diet just a few days or hours prior. The release marked a turn in the government's attitude towards the scandal. Ever since Shinzo Abe resigned and the COVID pandemic hit the country, the LDP government tried to snuff out the scandal by acknowledging certain elements instead of outright denying them like they did previously. The government doesn't contest the controversy around the heavy discount or the fact that documents were falsified, but tries to shift away the blame to others or admit to certain, less severe offenses. This happened in December of 2021, when the government surprisingly acknowledged the terms of Masako's suit and paid the full amount of compensation sought, and published a statement admitting that the death of Toshio Akagi was caused by depression after he was ordered to tamper with official documents. The new Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who took office shortly before, likely wanted to end the scandal once and for all, as even his new government was battered by opposition lawmakers in the Diet on transparency issues surrounding the scandal. For Masako, this was devastating, as she wanted the suit to continue in order for more evidence and information to be revealed to her and the public. Masako, after learning of the dismissal, said, "I started the lawsuit because I wanted to know more about why my husband died. The whole issue is not about the money. I was so disgusted by the way the lawsuit was terminated that I don't know what I could say to my husband." In a civil suit like this, Masako has no choice but to seek a monetary settlement, and if the government just chooses to pay, the suit is over. Now, however, in late 2021, Shinzo Abe as a political figure is long removed from the minds of most people, and with the primary antagonist gone, Moritomo Gakuen was a scandal reduced to transparency issues with the entire LDP government, an issue no doubt significant, although not as marketable in the media as one against the longest-serving Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe. Up until today, no significant details have come out regarding the scandal. Moritomo Gakuen chairman Kagoike was sentenced to prison for subsidy fraud in what many people call a swift trial by biased prosecutors. The police and prosecutors in Osaka, whom Toshio Akagi visited before his death, choose not to prosecute a single individual, both for the heavy land discount as well as for the document alteration. To this day, not a single person has been brought to justice for this rather obvious case of corruption and the felony act of altering public documents. Many questions still remain. Who exactly ordered the discount and falsification? Was Shinzo Abe or his wife implicated, or did the ministry officials completely act on their own? Was the released Akagi file complete? Chances are we will never know. Moritomo Gakuen is just one of many scandals in Japanese politics, albeit the most influential in recent years, and it only further alienated the public from politics. Japan, where the voter turnout is only 55%, is one of the most cynical countries when it comes to the public's perception of the political world. This case, however, can be considered especially bitter, as neither Masako, the public, or most lawmakers know the truth, and with Shinzo Abe's assassination in 2022, any hope for finding out if he really ordered the discount and/or falsification has likely gone to the grave with him.